Welcome back, everyone, to our Sunday sessions together. Thank you if you have been with us throughout the weekend for our virtual mini Newcastle Noir 2020, and welcome if you're joining us after the event as well. It's lovely to have you with us, just indulging in some wonderful crime fiction. For anybody who's not watched the previous sessions we've done, it was really important for us at Newcastle Noir to not let the year go by without celebrating what's most important to us, and that is crime fiction, local, national and international. And one of the key strands that we've had running through the weekend is to have the Northern Crime Syndicate authors with us. We felt that there were over 60 authors that were going to be taking part in the weekend, and to make a choice was really difficult, but we thought that to have those local authors and that Northern Crime Syndicate represented was just at the heart of Newcastle Noir. But before I introduce those members, I wonder again, should we not just take a moment? I don't think I would be here doing this without these authors, just to mark the passing of the legendary Nordic or Scandi Noir author, Mai Sherval, of the Sherval and Valor partnership, who brought us the great detective Martin Beck, and who really taught us about what good Scandi Noir is all about. And again, when authors leave us, they may not be writing anymore, but they leave us a legacy that is just so rich and so wonderful. So, Mai Sherval, everyone. So with us today, our Northern Crime Syndicate authors, we have Chris McGeorge. Welcome, Chris. I would say Christmas. Getting excited there. Chris McGeorge. Welcome, Chris.
Hi.
Hi. And Adam Peacock. Hi, Adam. Welcome.
Hello. Thanks for having us.
It's a total pleasure. Again, I should say to authors, if you've been watching and you know that Judith O'Reilly and Trevor Wood style themselves as the mum and dad of this criminal outfit and say that they have 4 boys. If you watched the Friday session, you'll know that we had the naughty twins, Rob Parker and Robert Scragg. They assured me that these 2 boys were much better behaved. I think by the end of the hour, we'll see whether or not that is the case. So I think it's best, rather than me ramble on, I wonder would you do us the honours of telling us about yourselves, about coming to this point in time. And you may find that I break in and ask you a few questions, but I'll pass that ball over to you. Chris, do you want to start for us?
Absolutely. So I'm Chris McGeorge. I got started writing fiction really young, but I really kind of broke into this by doing a master's course at City University London, which my first book, guess who, was my thesis, and I, just found an agent through the course, so that was really got me started. I owe a lot to the course. So I've written 2 books that are out so far, Guess Who, and Now You See Me, and hopefully my next book, Inside Out, will be coming out this year. Hopefully it's set for 29th of October at the moment, but who knows,
It's tricky at the minute. I wonder, would you allow me to break in, because you've given us such a rich amount there to talk about. So you did an MA in creative writing, and you said, and you made it sound so simple, and I got an agent. It's a bit like, and I went and, I don't know, I went and bought a loaf of bread. How did the course help you with that? What was the dynamic?
So Guess Who, it really happened quite quickly on in the course. It was 2 years, and we were meant to spend the second year writing the novel. But guess who actually came about from the first week's assignment of the first year? So I wrote it in the first year, and throughout the second year, I was constantly sending it out to agents. Got about 40 rejections, maybe. And then what happened is at the very end of the course, they did an anthology of every single student's chapter 1. And that got sent out to agents across London, I think. And someone contacted me, Hannah Shepherd from DHH contacted me from that.
Wonderful. And can I just say, what a fine agency
Absolutely, yeah.
to have been scooped by, without a doubt. So for you, it was an MA in creative writing that has brought you to this point. I'll be back with you, Chris. Adam.
Hello.
Hi, who are you? Why are you here? What's it all about?
I have no idea. Well, I was a teacher at a college, and when I left teaching a few years ago, so I did about 7 years there in my early 20s, and I'd started writing when I was on my PGCE course. I've been an avid reader, and at school when I was very young, like in juniors, I used to write little stories and stuff, but I didn't do that as a teenager as such. And then we did a piece of writing in a workshop class on the PGCE. And the tutor, who was like a creative writing master, he'd done that course and that was his sort of thing, but he was training teachers, give us some really good feedback on it. And he just said, look, why don't you try writing some short bits of fiction, email them to me and I'll give you some feedback. And so I went back and forth doing that for a little while. And he recommended Stephen King's On Writing as a book to kind of read,
Yes.
get into the writing process. And it just sort of snowballed from there. And I found, that passion I had as a young kid and the fact that I loved reading took hold. And when I left, I was writing the first novel, what became Open Grave, for a long, long time in my 20s. But I didn't have the mental capacity as such to get it done when I was teaching. And it was when I left in 2016 maybe, that I got it finished rather quickly and thought it was just, what's the next step? And I started, I got the Writers and Artists Yearbook. I was looking up kind of what to do with the manuscript and how to go about that. And it was a chance trip to Waterstones one day, and I saw a poster in the window and I thought, wow, that's great. It was a Kay Richardson novel. Carrie Ann, who she had an event at Waterstones in Newcastle. I thought, wow. And at that point, I was investigating other people's books. So I opened the cover, saw the publisher, Bloodhound Books, and thought, I like the look of that. And so then I went online, did some research, and thought, wow, a leading indie crime publisher. I like the look of the site, I like the look of the authors. Approached some of them to ask them about their experiences. And then from there I submitted, and rather quickly Bloodhound really liked it. They asked for the full manuscript and it just kind of snowballed from there. And then on I went to write the second one. So the first one was years in the making. The second one took us about 5 months, and that was so I do write under the name A.M. Peacock, because I didn't think Adam Peacock was very crime writery. But
can I say, I think it's good that you changed the name as well, because I always like to do a little bit of research. It's important to find out about authors, and when I put your name into a search for authors, and I found one called Adam Peacock, who writes quite steamy otherworldly literature, and I didn't know whether that was you, and I thought no, because Adam writes as A.M. Peacock. So
yeah, it definitely isn't me, and I can tell you my own experience that writing that kind of thing is a bit of an Achilles heel of mine. So
you mentioned that idea came out, you were doing your PGCE, and the idea was set there to become, and I love how, those different journeys into both of you sitting here today, to be an author there's never a one way to become. I always enjoy hearing people's stories, because I know there'll be people watching today who are thinking, maybe, or yeah, but I could never be, or I could never do. And every time an author tells their story of becoming, there might be somebody else there who thinks, actually, maybe. So thank you for sharing that. Now, Adam, you mentioned that your first novel, Open Grave, and it is set in the Northeast, is it not?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Why was it important, and why is it important for you to write within that location, within that region?
Well, I mean, I was born in South Shields, and I've grown up in South Shields, lived here all my life, except when I moved down south to Scarborough for university for 3 years, which is essentially South Shields in a different place, by the way. I found that out.
Really?
It's the same town. Although it's on Crime Watch a lot more, I found.
Even more than South Shields?
Yes, yeah. I used to sit in my student digs in Scarborough and see the street on the telly, which was very odd. But we weren't breaking any laws at that time. But no, I think at the time it was kind of a bit of write what you know. I thought, look, I love the Northeast. I love it as a place. There's some great kind of inner city Newcastle type stuff. You've got the towns on the outskirts. You've got Northumberland and the green leafy stuff. And so the scene that you can kind of create there is kind of wonderful. And then when I first started writing it, I sort of thought, no one's really doing this, and this will be my in, my kind of unique in. And then I walked into Waterstones one day and saw a whole Northumberland noir section, which is a good thing, by the way. But I do remember thinking, oh man, I was going to pitch me as the only one who wrote a novel set in Newcastle. Pretty much wasn't. But I'm heavily influenced by Scandi noir and stuff like that. And what I love about it is that the setting is like a character in itself. And I love the cold, the grim, the grey, how that kind of, and you get sort of the detectives involved in those stories who kind of mirror that personality almost. And that's what I wanted from my stories. And I thought, well, actually, the Northeast is a great setting for that. And so that's why I deliberately set all of my books, they kind of go a year along in advance each time. And it's always in winter, because I love using the weather as to kind of set that scene. So it's kind of me ripping off Scandi noir, but in a northeastern noir kind of way here.
Beautiful. I absolutely love the sound of that. I think location and weather, I know there are some people who think that, that's not important, but for me, I do like that aspect. If I can bring Chris in though at this point, because location for you and the kind of crime fiction that you write, which for me, it's locked room mysteries with a contemporary twist. You move about, and I wonder to what extent have you had experience? Like for Adam, these locations that he writes are known, and then I started looking at where the crime stories are that you've written. So the first one, am I right, was in a hotel bedroom?
Yes, yeah.
Am I right in understanding that it was post-orgy moment?
It was what?
Post-orgy, because they wake up with people around them.
Yeah, they haven't had an orgy, right? No. No, they're placed in the room.
My bad. I'm really sorry, because I was reading about it and I was thinking, so because I was going to ask you about, Adam said, it's all like write what you know, and I was going to go along a very different line there. So forgive me. We'll move swiftly on.
Okay.
To Standedge Tunnel. Yeah. Tell us about why, because it's a fascinating location. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so it was one day I was watching well, I wasn't watching it. I think my mum was watching it. I was watching Great Canal Journeys. I think I can't remember who it is. It's Prunella Scales and and
her husband Timothy West.
Yes, yeah. And and I just happened to be watching, you know, offhand, and saw this amazing, you know, amazing location, stand edge tunnel, that can take, you know, hours to get through, and sort of the surrounding area of Marsden. I just thought it was a great idea, and I had to look and see if anyone else had done it already.
Yeah.
Because I thought it's such a great location for a crime novel. So it just came out of seeing that clip on TV, and then I had to go there. You know, I had to go through the tunnel myself, and yeah, I'm kind of just in awe of it, really.
Did you sail your own barge through there, or did you go
No,
on?
I went on a tour. Yeah, so they just do tours through the tunnel on little tour canal boats.
How long does it take?
I believe it took us hour and a half, something like that. But obviously, back in the, you know, when it was first built, it would have took maybe up to 3 hours, because what would happen is they'd have, I think they're called leggers, people sitting on top of the canal boat, pushing through. So obviously that would take a lot longer than having a motor on your boat.
Yes, quite. Yeah. But in your book, this is set in modern times.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Is it not? And the premise being that, is it 6 people go in the tunnel and only one comes out alive?
Yeah. 6 people and a dog. And the dog's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. Never mind the people; they're expendable, always in the novel. But that animal, good, all intact. And then if I can go on to your next, because again, all around the locked room mystery, whether it be a hotel bedroom, or what I'm intrigued by is that you choose a tunnel to make it that locked space on a barge. I love that. And then you, in your next novel, you take us to a women's maximum security prison. Yeah. You saw the tunnel on a TV program. The notion of a women's prison, and why a women's prison and not a men's prison? What?
It was really to just give myself a bit of a challenge, I think, and as I believe I've said before, sometimes I think male writers get criticized for writing women poorly. I have, so I really wanted to challenge myself and write a story which 95% of the cast is female. So, you know, set myself up for a big fail, or, you know, maybe.
I love the fact, though, of you embracing that challenge, because you're quite right. I think, you know, and it's one of those easy sort of like digs to have at people, you know, take the gender line and say, you can't write this or you can't write that. But I love the way you don't just think, I'm going to create a main protagonist. I'm going to create so many women, you know, with it being in that setting, and I'm really going to. So I look forward, you know, to reading that when it comes out, because I've always been a big fan of, you know, dramas set in women's prisons, and so I'm looking forward to seeing what you do with that. I want to stick with location in a way, though, and come back to you, Adam, and talk about the repetition of the notion of the grave, that motif of the grave, you know, because open grave, and then the second novel, Grave Intent. Why did grave stick with you? You know, because you could have kept the same character, and we'll come and talk about the characters, but you could have kept the character but gone elsewhere with the title. Why not?
I suppose the quick and easy answer is the publisher really was keen to keep some continuity in the title.
Yeah.
But what I'll say is the first one, Open Grave, I mean, because the first one is based around a serial killer. That's kind of the main thread of the, and so because I live in South Shields and that's near Clevedon Hills, and I was there one day, and I just thought, imagine if you came across a body in an open grave on Clevedon Hills. So, oh, there's the hook. And so the serial killer, it became about open grave because the killer was leaving bodies and, burying them, digging them back up to be found in open graves. And so the title was really easy to kind of, it came to mind. And from very early on in the first draft, I had that as a working title and it never changed. The second one, you have to read it to understand, but the working title originally was The Third Scarecrow. And the opening chapter, when you read that, you'll understand why. But then I found that the rest of the novel didn't match that whatsoever. And then, talking about crime syndicates and whatnot, I then had an idea of the title being kind of The Syndicate, because the second novel is kind of a continuation of some of the threads from book one. It's kind of around organised crime in the Northeast and syndicates operating with like a boss at the top. But the publisher and I had a conversation. They were like, look, we think Open Grave's a great hook. We think, having some continuity around the title would be really good. And then they threw some ideas at us and I thought, I'll chew it over. And then I kind of settled on Grave Intent, which I think fits the mood of the book really well. Of course, the problem is if I end up writing 20 of them, then I'm going to run out of graves. The way I think at the minute is I'm going to write it as a trilogy. Which may or may not leave it open to more in future. But book 2 certainly ends in a way that book 3 has to be written, and I am writing it. And so
excellent.
After that trilogy, maybe I will try something else. Because
it's a good moment for me to come in with because I've been asking people to write in with questions. And Fiona from Durham Waterstones, she said, please ask Adam, is there a book 3? Yeah.
There's a question I've not seen on Twitter for a while. There is. It's taking a bit of time to write it. I think the reality is, in this kind of lockdown thing that we're in right now, I sort of maybe rather arrogantly thought, well, within about a fortnight, I'll get the book kind of busted out. But the reality is, I haven't been as productive as I would like with that. I am still working from home. I'm a trade union official through the day. And so having the time, mental space to do that hasn't been sort of that easy, I must admit. But you, as a writer, you go through those kind of ups and downs and stuff. And I think it's important that people know that, because sometimes we look to the Lee Childs of the world and think, well, every 6 months is a new book coming out.
There's something,
I did that with book 2. Now, the third one won't take the same length of time as book 1 for sure. And I am, around halfway through. But it is my intention to get it out this year.
It's wonderful. What I like is the fact that we're having this conversation and it's being recorded, so it's there. Adam, you can't get away from this now, that third book. Yeah,
well, I think it's important. I need that kind of pressure, that deadline, really. That'll be what gets us going.
Do you have a title in mind that might be Grave?
I don't, but there was a time when I first started that I thought, right, I was throwing around, riffing on that. But I haven't settled on one at all yet. So anybody who's read the books or just likes the word, if you want to give me some ideas, I'm always open to hearing those. So do let me know.
That's wonderful. People can find you on Twitter and on Facebook, to send you.
At AM Peacock Writer on Twitter. Facebook, you'll find my author page at AM Peacock. And obviously we have the Northern Crime Syndicate page that both Chris and I are a part of.
Brilliant. That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for that. Now, can I come then to you being part of the Northern Crime Syndicate? If people have been watching, they'll know how it came into being. So I just wonder, for the two of you, if you can talk to what has been your experience since it's been established and you're part of that. Chris, what's been your experience? How do you view that gang together?
I mean, it's so cool, really. I'm really like, it's a different world at the moment, and it's really given me something to kind of channel some energy into, kind of kept me grounded a little bit, and it's really nice just to start sort of create content for people around this time who need something to do. and hopefully, you know, it's entertaining and you get a couple of laughs out of it. And yeah, I just think it's fantastic.
What kind of things have you been doing? Because I know you've got a Facebook site, yeah? The live events that you've been doing, what kind of things have you been doing during lockdown?
Yep, so we have done 2 just kind of panels where we just talk about writing. And this week we did a thing called Whose Crime Is It Anyway? Where we attempt to write something together just by saying what comes into our heads. Sometimes badly.
Sometimes badly. Can people see the result of that on your Facebook site or YouTube site?
Yep. So it's uploaded to YouTube, but all the videos are linked on the Facebook. So yeah, you can see all of them.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Adam, your experience with this merry band?
Yeah, well, I think it was Judith, as you know how it came about, with Judith sort of approaching people and saying, do you fancy this? And I obviously did. I think the way it's evolving is very interesting, because originally we had a load of panels set up from kind of March onwards. And the idea was there were 6 of us. I hope I've got that number right. And yeah, 6 of us in the group. And what we were going to do was we were going to do 4 people on a panel with 1 of us hosting and then 1 dropping out each time. The idea was we could do local libraries and events, and there was no pressure on everybody to have to attend all the time because the numbers were such that we could rotate. And so we had that in mind. But then as it got closer, I was thinking, oh, you know, will it be quite samey? And what if we get a similar crowd? Because it's in like the region, you know? But of course, then it didn't happen because of the lockdown. It's kind of forced us to think, right, well, how will we do this? So we've, like Chris said, we had the 2 themed kind of panels, and I've hosted one around like the writing process. And of course, we're having to think creatively about how to put content out there that will appeal to people. But I think what's really interesting is, and Judith, as you know, being the mother of the group, she is very good at kind of saying, well, what are our aims for this? So my mentality with things like this is, right, we have an idea, we have a number of people, we have computers, we'll just do something and put it out there. And actually, it's very important to think strategically about what we want to do and achieve. And Judith's a really good voice in that regard. She's always asking that question. So it makes me think. But I think ultimately, it's been great because, you know, I think what people have commented on is that the authors together have a really good camaraderie.
Yes.
And I think we do have a very good mix. And we have a mix of writing as well. It's, you know, a couple of police procedurals, such as myself and Robert Scragg. We have the locked room stuff. We have all different kinds of writers within there. And I think moving forward, we have aims and thoughts on how that might evolve. And there is a podcast in the offing, I think.
Oh, yes, because you've beat me to yet another question which appeared on social media this afternoon by a certain Mr. Wood of the region, asking, will there be a podcast? So are you keen to develop that?
Yeah, I mean, I say this, you know, like, you know, a few years back, I hosted a radio show on Spark FM for a while as a local kind of radio host. It was nothing spectacular on my part, by the way. I love the station's wonderful. And I've always listened to podcasts and always been interested in it. And I just thought, you know, I've always kind of wanted to do one. And, you know, what's the hook? You know, how can I go about doing that? And now we have this Northern Crime Syndicate brand. We're keen to kind of do events and different things. And I think a podcast is a natural extension of that. So having always kind of fancied doing one, we are going to look to put one together. We're just getting the logistics set up. The idea will be that I guess probably 2 of us will host. It may be that I host all the time, and some of the other authors in the group dip in and out. So I think Chris and I may well do the first one together. And then we're going to have authors coming in, and we will just interview them. And it won't be like a Desert Island Disc, choose tracks and whatnot. But that essential, that kind of, there will be certain features that appear every time. And our aim is to grow that podcast and listenership. And it's not just about Northern writers on that, although it may be branded Northern Crime Syndicate podcast. What we are looking for is crime writers all around the country and the world who want to get involved and be interviewed, because I'm always interested to meet people and discuss things with people. And I think now is a great time for that. So my hope is that we interview all sorts of people, and, you know, we take our portable recorders to Harrogate in years to come and do interviews with authors and just kind of spread the word, really.
Brilliant. I love it, and I look forward to listening, because I'm sure it's going to happen. To come back to your books, Chris, you evidently don't write a series, and I wonder, when did you make a conscious decision to not follow that line? And maybe if we could go back a little bit further and say, did you consciously think, I am going to write locked room mysteries?
Well, first on the series, I think basically Guess Who just came as a complete idea, and it was very obvious that it was a beginning, middle, and end. It was contained. There was at one point kind of a sequel, maybe, with Morgan Shepherd again, but also his kind of character arcs kind of complete at the end. So I kind of made the decision to sort of step away from it. Now You See Me is a kind of sequel, because it takes place in the same universe, and exactly the same with Inside Out. But yeah, I wanted to have fresh stuff every single time, I think. And with these sort of more high concept crimes, I think it'd be really hard to have everything happen to one person.
It starts to become, I think, a little unrealistic. And even though this is fiction, I think readers do like a modicum of, this could happen. So yeah, I agree with you. Maybe carrying on with the same person, although Midsummer Murders,
Yeah.
although of course it's a lot gentler. I wanted as well, to come back to that idea of, were you influenced in your writing by the Golden Age?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. I mean, it's well documented that I love Agatha Christie.
When did you first read Agatha Christie?
When I was pretty young. Before I even knew it was called crime fiction, really. I just thought it was a book, so I read it. I read And Then There Were None and Murder on the Orient Express, very young, and then sort of, I think, the Pale Horse one as well, and kind of picked the others up a bit later on. But I've always liked that kind of traditional kind of feel to a book, which I tried to replicate a little bit.
I think you do that beautifully. That style that's there, but the contemporary feel, without just replicating. So I think you've moved it on very beautifully. I did read as well that the influence of the Golden Age, of you having a hamster called Agatha Christie.
I did, yeah.
Oh, you did? Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
Has Agatha gone?
So Agatha has gone, has been replaced by new hamster Arthur Conan Doyle. So, there you go.
Wonderful. The Golden Age spirit is still there. I do like it. Which a little segue to Adam with regard to furry creatures. I do notice, just snuck in on the side of the screen there, your cat isn't called Jack Lambert by any chance, is it?
No, my cat's called Theo, although he doesn't really answer to it, because he doesn't really answer to anything. I've got one eye on him, because I'm thinking, I hope he behaves, because once he gets going, he'll scream the house down. So while he sleeps, we're all right.
We're all right. He seems very peaceful there. I do like it. But I mentioned Jack Lambert and DCI Jack Lambert, and that you have a protagonist at the heart of your work, that a guy who struggles. There's a number of things. He's a sensitive soul, not weak, but for anybody who's not read the two novels, tell us about Jack and your, you know, your development of that character.
Jack, again, going back to, you know, my influences of, and I know a lot of people will say they're heavily influenced by Agatha Christie and whatnot in their writing. And I was going to say, I was glad you didn't ask me that question, but to answer it now without even being asked it, I wasn't really influenced in that way with my writing. So like, kind of like with the Scandi noir stuff, it was kind of Joe Nesbo, or as the Norwegians would say, U Nesbo. And the likes of Stuart McBride and, you know, Scottish crime writer and whatnot was my crime influences. And what I loved about particularly the Harry Hole or Ari Ula series with Joe Nesbo and the Verlander series with Henning Mankell was that I loved the detective, and as much as I loved the crimes and you know, reading the novel within itself and that story, I was interested in the characters and what happened to them. And the thing with Harry Hole is that from one book to the next, you never know where he's going to be personally, or his private life, or kind of what's going on. And I wanted to create somebody who readers would really like empathize with, sympathize with, you know, at times struggle with, but make them question things and their own thoughts on things. And I wanted people to care about him. And so with the first book, I dropped them in, and I thought I want to give him all manner of problems. And so as a main character, Jack is gay. And in the story, it's not the story, but it's part of who he is. So in a sense, it is. And he's come out as an adult in later life, in his 30s, which means he's left behind. You know, he has a young daughter and an ex-wife, and somebody who works on the force who he was dating, who this, you know, bombshell from him has kind of wrecked all that was sort of left behind. So people are struggling with him. He's struggling with his own sexuality in that he doesn't feel freed by the admission. He feels shackled by unhappiness. And that's a deep-rooted unhappiness that Jack feels. And so far from kind of being liberated by that, he's in his own sort of mental prison, and he's tortured by a lot of things. You know, I wrote in that, you know, there's a criminal element, organised crime in the books, both of them. And Jack has a history of running with gangs when he was a young lad. And so, you know, his adult life has been about running away from who he used to be in all kinds of different...
In all kinds of ways, yeah.
In that sense, he's only just discovering who he is, but is somebody who gives himself a hard time and likes to do things alone because he doesn't want to put other people in danger. But inevitably, that's always kind of the wrong choice, but he's unable to get away from that. And so Jack's happiness and private and, you know, personal and professional life go up and down between the two novels.
Did you, and I wonder whether the publishers have said to you, but were you ever concerned at, you know, the sexuality side of your character, thinking that it might put people off? Or do you think we're at a point in reading our crime fiction where that aspect of a person just really isn't a bother anymore for readers?
I think that, I mean, when I did the first draft, I didn't have Jack as a gay character.
Okay.
And what happened was, I mean, I say the first draft, a big chunk, and I had a friend of mine who's a writer of script, he does scripts and whatnot. I gave him a body of writing. I said, look, I'm frustrated with this because I feel like it fits everything. It ticks all the boxes in terms of crime fiction. But what am I kind of missing here? And he just said, look, Jack is a great character, but he's also very typical. Mm-hmm. And so we had a discussion, well, how do I make him not typical? And what had I not read before? And I said, well, actually, I've not read a gay male character lead in a crime novel, which I thought was actually a bit strange in the sense that, you know, I think literature, to some degree, depending on the kind of literature it is, should reflect society. And so the fact that hadn't happened made me think, well, that's a bit odd, but that's a bit of a unique selling point as well. So I didn't do it cynically, but I did think maybe that would make him a bit different. And there's so much, emotionally with that, especially coming out as an adult, that I could use within the story to make him a more interesting and three-dimensional character. I wasn't worried about readers' sort of responses to that. I'd like to think that we as a society are beyond that. But I think like I say to people, it isn't the story, it's just part of who he is. And I think it's done in a reasonably subtle way so that I didn't want it to be front and center. It didn't need to be because it's just who he is. And I think we need to just accept things. And And if somebody did have a problem with it, then perhaps they aren't the kind of people that I want reading my books. So,
Yeah. Thank you for writing a character like that, because it's like you say, what can you bring to the genre? That, I mean, we have so many fabulous choices to make, and you bring us somebody who's a little bit different. Back to you, Chris. Of course, you have a cast of characters in each book. So I wonder if we could come, and again, without any plot spoilers for people who haven't had the joy of going to your novels, if you could just give us a flavour from each one of what are the underlying issues. We're presented with, there's been a murder, and how has that murder been committed, or how have those murders been committed? But there's lots of other things rumbling along under there. Can you give us some flavours about the things, the aspects you wanted to touch on in your writing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Guess Who, it really is the story of kind of redemption, I think, him being grand about it. Morgan Shepherd I always wanted to write a book of just this most horrible guy. Like he's absolutely despicable at the start of the book. Maybe a little too despicable, because it was hard to write some of it. And I kind of wanted to show kind of how even someone like that can change by the end of a story, even though he's put in the strangest situation. He can learn from it, I think. And then Now You See Me, I wrote a nice guy as a protagonist for once. Robin Ferringham is mourning his missing wife, who went missing 3 years ago, and it's all about his quest to find out what happened to her, really. So that's not what the books are about, but it is what the books are about,
Yeah. And I do think these issues, if we can call them that, are very much, what I think. I think as crime readers, we love to see a mystery or a murder solved, but it's the richness of what else are you doing as authors with the book, that takes us. So redemption, dealing with grief. And can you tell us, when you take us to this women's prison, which I wanted to ask, and I didn't before, it's a fictional space you've created, yeah?
Yes, it's a new kind of prison, high security. It's called Northern.
Have you based it on anywhere?
No, so I did do a lot of research, watching documentaries and stuff about women's prisons, and then I kind of decided to go a different way with it. So it's a prison, but it's a new kind of prison.
And the underlying theme, just to whet our appetite?
It's about Cara Lockhart, who has to come to terms with the crime she committed or didn't commit, will define her forever. And the book is about her coming to terms with that.
Our reputation and what, and damaged or not. Yeah, thank you. Adam, I was reading, and I'm intrigued that you, all things not, out of lockdown, but to do with the fiction writers at the Word in South Shields.
Yeah.
Can you explain to us what that is and how it came about, and your involvement with that?
Yeah. Well, the South Shields Fiction Writers was created by me. And although I run it, I hesitate to say I always say to people, for the benefit that I run it, but really it's a collegiate thing. And so it came about because most writing groups meet on a weekday, on an evening. And I was finding that I would travel somewhere. And there was one in Shields that I went to and it kind of ended, the attendance tailed off and it ended a few years before that. And I thought, well, I'm traveling places, I'm knackered. I thought, well, what would suit me? And what would suit me is a Sunday afternoon and something that's free. And so I approached the Word and said, look, I would love to set something up. What do you think? And they were up for it. And by the way, the Word, it's a fantastic place, but they've been very supportive of me in my writing and stuff ever since I started out, really. And so we operate the first and third Sunday of every month at the Word, 1 till 3 p.m. And the idea is that anybody can come along as long as you're an adult and you are actively writing some form of fiction. And we have a bit chat at the start. I provide some prompts or a prompt which you can ignore or use. And then at the end, if people want to read out, they can, and we just give feedback. So it's different to some writing groups in that because it's free, I don't want to kind of, I don't have to lesson plan stuff, so yes. It is very laid back. And in a sense, I use that space sometimes to just crack on with the novel. And obviously I don't want to step on the toes of other writing groups that are local or regional where they are charging. So theirs is a very different thing. This is very much like if you're coming there to learn something, you will through the feedback and whatnot, and because you are writing, but I'm quite hands off with it. But beyond that, we have a number of writers who've self-published books and who are trying to get published now, who've been shortlisted in competitions. They've done events themselves at the Word and stuff. And so in a sense, we have a bit of a brand now. And it's absolutely fantastic because, it's great for me to see, having been a teacher as well, not only teaching them, but just to be part of a group where I can, enjoy their success and stuff. It has really been fantastic. And the Word have been great. It's where I do my launches for my books. So I have done so far. And so it's just a great local space for writers to come together.
Wonderful, wonderful. I always enjoy that thing of people passing on craft. I no wonder, as you say, by profession you're a teacher, and it's just that natural thing within to see people go on. Chris, I read as well though that you have a blog. Are you still writing the blog, the Festival of Blood?
On and off, not as much as I used to.
Because it sounded way more macabre than running a writing group in South Shields.
You'd be surprised.
So the focus of your writing when you can on the blog, Chris, what kinds of things do you bring out?
It's usually just sort of discussion pieces. I used to have a series where I dissected every episode of Death in Paradise, which I had to stop because it was Death in Paradise is a great show. But, there's a lot of similar crimes, so there's a I've said my piece about it, I think. So yeah, it's kind of it's comedy focused stuff like that.
Lovely. Would you? I mean, are you, now that we're in lockdown, and I have a couple of lockdown questions for you, but now that we're in lockdown, are you finding that you can focus to write something like that, or is it just not flowing at the minute to do a blog?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a weird kind of time, and it's a weird headspace to be in right now. And yeah, I just and when I am writing, I'm doing, like writing my book or something. I've just actually copy edited Inside Out, sent it off today.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So yes, when I am in a productive mood, it kind of has to be focused on my actual work.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I was thinking when Adam was talking before of starting writing, while you were still teaching, and the pace that you were allowed to go at. I mean, I take my hat off to you, Adam, to even be writing whilst carrying on that kind of profession. Yeah, and now that you are, now that you work with the trade union, because again, I totally understand the weight of the work that's involved there and the issues that, needing to be broached. Are you able to set aside, because I think you work 4 days a week, is it now?
I used to. I decided to, most writers like to drop days and end up working part-time or not at all as a day job to then write. I did the weird thing of going from 4 days back to 5 to change jobs and work with a different union, which in itself is interesting, put it that way. I got the second book done when I was working 4 days a week very quickly. I'm writing very little now. But then there were reasons, it was an organisation I'd previously worked for and really wanted to go back to. Mm. And so I'm happy in terms of having made that move, although I enjoy both jobs. But there's no denying that the writing has taken a bit of a hit in terms of productivity since that move back. But I think that's quite important to highlight, really, because I think there is a perception sometimes that writers are just churning books out. And if you are struggling to write a book, then I can tell you, as somebody who has books out, it's not easy. And so, and it's like when I was starting out and everybody seemed to be a journalist or previously a journalist or had been a retired detective or something. And I thought, this isn't for me. But actually, I was in no way a criminal or a policeman or anything like that, and still wrote a crime novel. So anybody can really do it.
Because I did want to ask you, when you say, not a criminal or a police, but this aspect of your work of that organised crime, and Jack Lambert having been, as a much younger man, having, been in those circles, I wondered about the research that you've done for your books, and to what extent might you or might you not be or have been connected with shady Northeast characters.
Well, as somebody who's very handy with his fists, as you may be able to tell, I spent 10 years running with a gang in Newcastle and infiltrated them rather. Now, to be honest, it stems, I guess, from the stuff I'm reading and a real interest in that kind of thing. Like, I love the stuff around the craze, the mythology of it all. I love, like some Peaky Blinders and that kind of thing. And because I have an interest in politics, being a trade unionist, it kind of comes with the territory. What I loved was that, and I think Dorian McGuinness, who's kind of the big bad, although a bit lovable rogue crime boss in the books, the idea that there is a political game being played all the time, and that he knows things that the reader doesn't, that Jack might not, and vice versa. And it was that kind of manoeuvring. And I was a big fan of the Sons of Anarchy TV show. It got brutal, that, by the way. But I just found that there was always something at play. And I think having an organised crime group just allows for loads of that great stuff. So there's always something going on that we're not quite sure whether who's in the know and what the reasons are behind it. And so many strands. And I think when you have organised crime as well, you can branch out, and it covers all sorts. Protection, dealing in people, drugs, all kinds of things. And so that just opened up a world for me. So I didn't do any severe research in terms of like getting involved. Although I'm sure I would do very well in that world. But it's just because I was interested, and I thought it serves a great purpose in the book.
It does. I was going to say, I was just a little bit worried about, whether we should keep an eye on at some point you disappear, because you've maybe got too close or found out things.
Well, I hope it's not too close to life, because I would hate to actually go missing or get any threats because somebody feels I've written about them. As far as I'm aware, I don't know of any gangsters that own fish shops in Newcastle. That could be wrong.
You never know what you're going to see coming up on those social media sites that you mentioned. I'm sure somebody will come back, but no. So I wonder, I've got a couple of lockdown questions, and Chris, if I can put it to you first. You are allowed with you to have one of your characters from any of your novels in this tricky time. And I suppose the question is, who would you most like, or who could you best put up with in the situation? You don't have to get rid of anybody who might be with you in the space as well. It's just you have to take on board one of your characters. Who would it be and why?
sorry, I'm dead air. I think it would either be Rona Michelle from Guess Who, because she's just a really, really nice person. Or it would be Simon Winter, who's an old psychologist, and they're probably the most wholesome people I have in my books, I think. Now, I would hate Morgan Shepherd to be yeah.
Not the. I wanted to ask you as well, if we can. I take your choice, and I think very wise choice under the circumstances. But when I was talking to Louise L.J. Ross on Friday, and she mentioned about this idea of however you create a character, whether they be a sympathetic or not so sympathetic character, but it was important as you as the creator to be fond of them in some way. And I wonder, you don't speak fondly, of Morgan,
yeah,
because of his character, which is painful, but deep down inside, are you?
Do I hate him or do I like him?
Are you fond of him? Are you fond of him?
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. I think he's made some big wrong choices, but at the heart of it, I think he's a good guy. I don't. I think.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I don't know if if either of you have those friends that are so infuriating, but you wouldn't want to be without them.
Yeah.
And
all of them.
all of them.
Yes, but all of them, yeah.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you for your response. Adam, would you take Jack or would you take someone else?
No, I think it's a great question because it makes you think about who you are as a person and who you would mix well with. And don't get us wrong, I love Jack and I think he's a very interesting character, but if I had to live with him in this scenario, we'd both be drinking too much whiskey because I'd be led astray by him in that regard. We'd be sitting miserably, not talking about our feelings. And so I think Dorian McGinnis, he's a criminal. I cannot really say that, although he's a very fun character to write. I would probably go with DC Claire Gerard in the book. She's the kind of character she's an assertive woman. She's quite upbeat. She thinks logically about things. She's very bright. And she's the kind of person that if I was feeling sort of sorry for myself, she would say, Howie, let's get this book right. Let's do something. And she would be a good driving force. And I think we all need people like that in our lives.
Yeah, definitely. And I think even more so now, because understandably, things can weigh very heavy, I think, upon us. It's easy to become, bogged down when we maybe don't have the usual avenues that we have to de-stress and things like that. So a character like her, I think, yeah, definitely. And yes.
Just so different to him. She's always she's the one that gets away with things with him, and I quite like that in the book.
Yeah, it's a beautiful dynamic, and I really hope, again, to see. I always love to see serials like that adapted, and there's no pressure, and I'm not saying, but I think they would make a great dynamic on the small or large screen, depending on, so that's just my point of view. I must say, sorry, it's what?
I've cast most of the parts, so yeah.
Have you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do the people who you've chosen, do they know you've cast them?
Well, if they're watching this, they might do eventually. So I think for Jack, it's got to be Luke Evans, the Welsh actor. He's Gaston in Beauty and the Beast.
Yes.
Right age, he's gay himself. He's got the right build, and I think he would pull off. I think he would just be absolutely wonderful as Jack Lambert. So if he's watching, then give us a shout. Yeah,
please, Luke, get in on this. Yeah, let's make this happen. And for Claire, have you got who you'd have for Claire?
Oh God, I put on the spot. From what I remember, it may well have been somebody like Jessica Chastain.
Oh, yeah.
Whether she's the right age, because Jessica Chastain, because when I started writing this years ago, so I've had to recast. So maybe I'll have to think about that. So somebody like that, yeah.
Yeah. Do put it out there on social media who you'd choose, because bringing it to now, because I'd be very keen. That question, by the way, you said it was a good question, and I have to give credit because I'm using it during this mini weekend. It's Susan Heads from the Book Trail. I don't know if you're familiar with Susan. She sent that one in, and I've used it with all the panels because I just think it's fabulous. And for now, and then my sort of like question for this is, whilst we've been here now for a few weeks, have you discovered something about yourself, and it can either be positive or negative or somewhere in between on that spectrum, that you never realized, an attitude, an approach, doing something differently as these weeks have gone on? Anything that you can think of that you can, of course, share in public, too untoward?
I think for me, I think I just never realized how much I enjoy company. Not necessarily, in my house, like going out and talking to people on the dog walks and stuff. I've made friends, which I never would have done if this wasn't happening, because usually I'm, if I'm going on a walk with them, I'm quite closed off. I have my headphones in and stuff. But since this has happened, I've been a lot more, friendly with people, which I think is definitely going to carry on moving forward, because I enjoy it. So.
Yeah. Thank you. Adam, for you?
Well, on the right side, I mean, I've said this before. I think what I've learned is that, you tell yourself, when I potentially got all this time, I will get X, Y, and Z done. And I found that actually it's quite easy to not. Maybe that wasn't the reason, and it's maybe a motivation thing sometimes. But I guess, like, I'm somebody who, I'm quite, I'm outgoing and I'll speak to people and I have friends and I like to be social and stuff, but I also have a lot of introspection in my life, and I think very deeply about myself and kind of what I want and stuff like that. And, living for those 1 hour walks per day or runs or whatever I'm doing, I've had a lot of thinking time, and I've been keeping the similar routes. And I've just taken, and I've lived in this town all my life, more or less, and it's just, I've noticed things I never noticed before, and I'm starting to kind of, it's that Groundhog Day thing where, like, everything's the same and you're a bit miserable, but then hopefully at the end of it, what he comes out of it, doesn't he, with an appreciation of the life around him. And so I feel like I'm on that kind of journey. But whether I will be this sunny, positive person at the end, I don't know. But I'm certainly, the time to think has been interesting.
Yeah. You make me think about that idea of, almost like we're regaining senses and approaches that, because of that previous very busy, hectic, 21st century life, that we were losing or had lost. So maybe it's a time for that to regain.
I think it's like, what I've learned is that prior to this, I wasn't really paying attention at all.
Yeah.
That's how I feel, as well.
Yeah. Have we, there's difficult things about now, but, to have had this opportunity to be aware, to stop, to be friends, to contemplate, things to be treasured maybe. And I liked what you said as well, Chris, that maybe when this is over, that we don't lose these things.
Well, I think definitely a lot of things are going to be different for everyone, and but especially for me, like I'll never do something as simple as walking into Sainsbury's the same way ever again.
Yes. Yeah.
Because it's just so weird.
Yeah, our whole thought processes and patterns. But what I have been saying to authors as we've spent this weekend together, one thing is for sure, whatever happens, storytelling, enjoying being told stories, enjoying reading stories. I hope Chris and Adam, as people who tell stories and develop stories, that you know, you won't stop, you know, offering us these fabulous tales. Chris, I hope you lock us, well, you are doing, because you're going to lock us in this women's prison, which is fabulous. And Adam with Jack Lambert in the 3rd book, you know, you're going to take us there, and that is brilliant. I want to thank you both for our conversation together this afternoon, and thank you for agreeing to be part of this mini festival. I am asking authors, and I ask you, you will come back next year when we can do it in the flesh. Hopefully we can go back to Newcastle City Library and do the festival as we were meant to. Will you come back?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, I wish you both the very best, and see you soon, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, bye guys,
Bye.
bye.